This is What Next with the Torisk-Team. Please be sure to continue liking those videos. If you want to keep up with the latest episodes, please subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms. And we're live. Thank you for joining What Next with the Torisk-Team, everybody. We appreciate the support that we've been getting. And I've actually gotten a lot of questions about my travel habits. A lot of you know that I travel for a living with one of our companies, RTS. And this week, I got to travel to Tennessee. And I'm supposed to leave last Monday, but with the tropical storm approaching, I went ahead and took off a day early in the truck with my son, Trace. I got to bring my oldest son. It just moved back in with us from after being away for 2 years in college, earning a fire science degree in Orlando. And we got to spend 8 days in a truck out there watching crews. And one of the things that we in this family talk about a lot is music. Being a drummer and ex-professional drummer, a wannabe professional, we got paid a little bit of money, but mostly it was beer money that we got paid, but we still got paid, which makes it a professional. I'm glad it's one of my proudest things that I could say as a professional, air quotes there. But we did even travel to Nashville, where I did play for a little stint. Very unique musical setting there. And Trace really had just a million questions. And we started talking about some backstories of some of the people we saw there. And one of the people that came up in our travels was actually Nirvana, because when we left, we were listening to a lot of eclectic music. And I was telling Trace about how Kurt Cobain had a lot of demons with his heroin addiction and a lot of other issues with his childhood, but that's what made him such a prolific writer. Okay, and he knew what he wanted, and he actually never really looked outside of himself. He knew what he wanted. He put it on paper, and he was able to transfer that onto digital tape to give to us, to listen to and enjoy. But he had two other people with him. He had Dave Grohl, one of the best drummers as far as power and consistency, and definitely noise level. If you know the story, I read a lot about Dave, and he had a very high level, one of the loudest drummers that ever played on a natural set of drum sets. But he was also living at Kurt's house. And when he would go to sleep every night, he would write. And he would write all these songs that he had, because he also had a relatively normal childhood, but ADHD, and was growing up in a time when punk was developing, and just had a lot of influences on him, where he was exposed to a lot of things, and he was always very creative, and he wrote prolifically. But Kurt Cobain never asked Dave Grohl what he was writing, and Dave Grohl was never really able to talk to Kurt about what he was writing. We all know what happened to Kurt Cobain. He ended up losing his life and actually taking his life. And boy, that affected Dave really poorly, negatively, as you can imagine. His whole world was rocked. And a few weeks after, he was asked by one of his heroes, Tom Petty, to join his band and be his drummer for the road for an upcoming tour. And if you can imagine, Dave Grohl would, back Kurt Cobain, and had this crazy, up and down, heroin addicted, bigger than life stories, playing all these sold out arenas and festivals. And now Tom Petty, your childhood hero, really just an influencer on a lot of people in music, but even punk people, right? Like Nirvana. And so Dave had a decision to make: go on the road with Tom Petty, which would be just an unbelievable experience, or trust in himself and all the music that he'd been writing and make a go for it himself. And as y'all know, that Dave is the lead singer and guitar player for Foo Fighters, but he was the original drummer, and he was the original drummer. Actually, he was like the third drummer for Nirvana, or maybe the 15th drummer, because they were pretty hard to get along with. But Dave fronts Foo Fighters. Taylor Hawking is now his drummer, and he was the drummer for Alanis Morissette, and I was telling Trace all these stories, and he had a bunch of great questions. But Trace said, why didn't he, contribute to Nirvana? And Kurt just never asked him to. So we were talking about, I think we had 12 hours home, and I think we have about 8 hours of Dave Grohl music, Foo Fighter music, really. And Trace we kept going back to talking about how much differently it could have been for Nirvana if Dave could have contributed. And it got us thinking and talking. We started talking about business, as most of our conversations tend to revolve in. Revolves to business and how this relates to business. And I started telling him about my team all across the country. And I asked him, imagine if I have a Dave Grohl working for me, for my organization, that I never tapped into, and I never got their opinions. I never asked them what they thought of my systems and my processes that I've implemented over the last 30 years into this thing. And I've worked with my very close team building. It's been a collaboration of best practices. And of course, it's a little different in Texas than it is in Tennessee, than it is in Virginia, that it definitely is in the Bahamas or the Virgin Islands. But you have to get the feedback from your team. You're going to leave so much on the table if you don't value the experiences and the perspective of the people that you work with. So many leaders like Kurt Cobain, who was the leader of Nirvana, had tunnel vision about his process and his system and what he wanted to put across. That imagine he might be alive today. He might have heard a song that Dave Grohl that inspired him. He might have been there writing that day with Dave Grohl instead of locked it above his garage. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. But I know that I value my opinion of my staff, my team. And many times someone will come across something that will make a lot of sense to a lot of logistical sense. It might make a process. It might cut out 5 steps on something that I do across the platform with dozens and dozens of people. And so it makes it easier for us. It makes it easier for the customer. And that's because we have an open door policy of collaboration. Anybody can call me, text me. I don't really have an office in Palm Beach. I have a corporate office, but I don't sit there too much because I'm in the field listening to my contractors and listening to my workers. My son's landscaping company. We talk every day about things, and we come up with different ideas. So how many ideas are you listening to from your team? Do they feel comfortable just coming to you and telling you that they think that maybe they can do something a little bit differently that might improve your system or your process? And in turn, pass it out to everyone and save a lot of time and become more efficient. If nothing else, maybe their idea doesn't really work, but they feel valued, that they can come in and talk to you. Even if their idea isn't quite right for your system, they feel valued. And there's no price you can put on an employee feeling value. So there's a lot of benefits from talking and discussing about these things with the people in your organization. So take that for what it's worth. Thank you for listening. That's all I'm going to give you today on a Sunday. The TGIS, the grind includes Saturday and Sunday, a Sunday edition, a nice little music family road trip story for you. And I wish you all the best. We'll catch you next time on What Next with the Torisk-Team.